Okay, so you just want me to talk about my story? Okay. So my name, like she said, is Jacqueline Smith, and I have multiple sets of multiples. I have 4-year-old twin boys and 17-month-old boy-girl twins. This is with no medical intervention. This is just what my body does. It's been a surprise. The twins somewhat run in my ex-husband's family. He has a set of twin aunts, but not at all on my family. There are several different types of twins. Both sets of my twins are 100% fraternal, meaning there were 2 eggs that were individually fertilized. Sometimes you can have the difference between identical twins or what they call mirror twins or semi-identical is exactly when the egg separates and becomes 2 different embryos, which I think is really interesting. But the reason I know, besides the boy-girl twin thing, which sometimes you can have an anomaly and you can have, I forget what it's called, but sometimes you can actually have semi-identical boy-girl twins. But I know all of my kids are super fraternal without any kind of DNA testing, because when they did the ultrasounds with the boys, it was 16 weeks. And when they did the sonogram over the ovaries, you could see the 2 separate enlarged follicles within the ovary itself. My youngest, my 16-month-old, they actually started out as a triplet pregnancy. And also in that case, when they did the sonogram over the ovary, you could see that there were 3 extremely enlarged follicles that had all released eggs. That pregnancy turned into a twin pregnancy right around 10 or 11 weeks or so. There's a bunch of different ways that twins can attach inside the womb as well. Both of my sets of twins are called di-di. And let me look up what exactly, I looked it up for you guys so I would get the terminology correct. That means diachorionic, diamniotic, meaning 2 placenta, 2 amniotic sacs, and 2, it's called a chorion. It's the outer membrane that contains the amniotic sac within it. I just lost you guys. Let me get there. Sorry about that. Sorry for the interruption. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. So, which is the healthiest, safest twin pregnancy scenario that you can have? Every single twin pregnancy is considered high risk just because the human body really is designed to ideally just have 1 child at a time. And the difference between a twin pregnancy and a triplet pregnancy, as far as risk to the mother and the babies, is exponential. I didn't realize that until the second pregnancy. With the boys, I had very few complications. I was quite nauseous in the beginning, a little bit beyond the first trimester, which why women do or don't get morning sickness, we don't entirely know. It just happens to some women and to some it doesn't. There's a lot of really fun old wives' tales, like if you get heartburn, your baby has a lot of hair, or if you get morning sickness, you've got a really healthy baby in there or a big baby. It's funny kind of what cultures have adopted to help explain the anguish that sometimes pregnancy can be. So I experienced morning sickness for the first trimester and a little bit beyond with the boys. But from there on, it was pretty smooth sailing. I was able to carry them until 38 weeks, 5 days, which is considered full term for twins. The babies made it to 37 weeks on the dot, which is considered just barely under the somewhat slightly premature window. The boys were, Miles was 6 pounds, 5 ounces. Oliver was 5 pounds, 13 ounces, so just shy of 6 pounds, which is considered pretty good for twins. This is an old statistic, but I think babies that were born under 6 pounds, it used to be, were at higher risk for diabetes, but both of my boys are healthy as horses. The only addendum to that would be my 4-year-olds are autistic, but there's no known connection between pregnancy, anything, and autism. So that's considered, we don't know a ton about autism, but a lot of research says there's a genetic component as well as a whole bunch of other things. So that's still a bit of a gumbo pot as to what the autism situation. But my babies, my 16-month-olds, were born, like I said, at 37 weeks on the dot. And Emma my daughter, my one girl, tried to come out hand first. So we ended up doing a C-section that time. I was really hopeful for a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. I had a cesarean with my sons. Sorry, I'm skipping back and forth between pregnancies. It's triggering memories from between the pregnancies. But with the boys, at my last, so you start out going every couple of months with a pregnancy. This is common knowledge, so forgive me if I'm saying things you guys already know. But at the end, especially with a twin pregnancy, you end up going every couple of days to make sure that everything's okay, because things can go from okay to not okay very quickly when babies are running out of room. They're all smushed up in there. There's such a lack of space. Sometimes there can be issues with the umbilical cord or placenta issues, or even amniotic fluid. So you get checked a boatload at the very end of a twin pregnancy. And the last health scan that we did was a sonogram. And my son Oliver's belly was showing a little bit distended, which could show issues with like bowel perforation and stuff like that. So they really wanted to get them out of there ASAP. They were willing to try and induce me. But when I got to the hospital, they did 2 separate monitors. So they hook you up with 2 different monitors, one that's supposed to be for each baby. But what ended up happening was Oliver kept bouncing around so much. I had excess amniotic fluid both pregnancies. They lost him on the monitor a couple of times, which of course is terrifying when you're in the hospital and you're ready to like have a healthy baby and suddenly they lose one off the monitor. So my OBGYN suggested that instead of kind of messing around with positions, because they kept changing positions, that we just go ahead and do a cesarean. And I tell this to all my friends when they're having babies now, like your birth plan just needs to be like gentle guidelines, but priority number 1 should really be whatever it takes to have a healthy baby. We have a lot of social media and just cultural expectation on women and how their births should go and how in control they should be of X, Y, and Z. And it goes against a significant amount of Western modern medicine. But I really just think if you stick to your guns about whatever will get you healthy baby or babies, in my case, is just kind of has to be the do all end all. And you'll have a lot less shattered expectation, I think, or let down in the experience if you're just open to kind of whatever happens. So I said fine with the C-section, and they did that. And it ended up that both boys had their umbilical cords wrapped around their necks 3 times. So a vaginal birth would have been extremely risky. So things worked out for the best anyway for that scenario. No one spent any time in the NICU. They latched on immediately. They were just healthy, pink, little, perfect boys. So that was the first pregnancy. With my babies, I went through the first trimester very similar to the first trimester with my boys. But it's important to know, I think, that every pregnancy can be totally different with the same woman, with the same partner that she's having babies with. It's just it's not a gamble, but what happens kind of. So I just happened to have a similar experience with morning sickness with the second set of babies. And then as we got into the second trimester, I had a little bit of an issue with some preeclampsia scares. One day I was just kind of cleaning up after the boys, and my vision got really blurry. Like if you look at snow for too long, I know that's not a thing in California, but if you stare at snow like a bright light, it reflects off and you kind of, your vision is a little bit hazy for a little bit. I experienced that, but it didn't go away for over 30 minutes. I have a blood pressure cuff here, which I bought during my second pregnancy so that I could monitor what was going on, which I highly recommend for anybody going through pregnancy. And my blood pressure was like, I'm going to mess up the number. It was like 144. But for me, that's astronomically high. I normally have blood pressure of like 113 over 76, like a quite healthy individual. So I called the hospital and they had me come in and they monitored my contractions for a little while. With the second set of babies, I had contractions for over 3 weeks before they were actually born, which I didn't experience at all with the boys. So that was kind of an interesting tidbit. I had a running with my husband at the time. I would text him every time I had a contraction, and the text messages were hilarious because it was just like contraction, 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 contraction. So anyway, That was one of the few complications. I was very lucky that I didn't have anything like gestational diabetes or any kind of complication like that. At 37 weeks, I went in for my normal every couple of day appointment. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, Emma, my daughter, was trying to come out. I was already 3 centimeters dilated, and my daughter was kind of trying to exit the situation Wonder Woman style. So, which is how she lives her life, just FYI. And so we decided that the VBAC, the vaginal birth after cesarean, just wasn't the safest option. So we're just going to go ahead and do a C-section, which my OBGYN did. It was harder than the first one. The anesthesiologist is kind of pivotal to the whole situation, and the epidural can kind of make or break the situation. And they did a wonderful job, but I just remember I was in a little bit more discomfort this time. The epidural was a little bit too high, so I had a little bit of trouble moving my diaphragm for breathing, and I ended up. This might be TMI. I don't know. This is MedClub. So I did end up vomiting during both C-sections actually at one point, but they're prepared for that. They have that, like at the dentist office, little suction thing that'll help you out because you can't move. I've seen situations where women's arms have actually been kind of like tied down while they're doing the cesarean, so they can't fidget. I was lucky enough that I was not in that situation. That would have made me horrendously uncomfortable. But they have a screen up so that you can't see what's going on, which is absolutely for the best, even for curious minds. You don't want to see your insides on the outside. But anyway, so I have 2 sets of wonderfully healthy babies. My Sam, who is one of my 16-month-olds, he spent 24 hours in the NICU. He had a little bit of trouble breathing at first. So initially what they did, they left them in their fluid and the gunk and all of that good stuff, the good bacteria that ends up on them after birth, and brought him over to me so that he could feel me, he could hear me, he could experience me, and that helped with the breathing a little bit, but not to the point where the doctors were comfortable just releasing him to me. So he went to the NICU, and thank God this was before all of COVID, because my heart just goes out to mothers that are in this experience during COVID. I can't imagine. So Sammy went to the NICU, and his breathing improved significantly over the course of a couple of hours, but then they didn't like his glucose. They actually wanted his glucose up a little bit, which is interesting in hindsight, but they wanted it at about a 70 consistently for several testing, which they did testing every 2 hours. And he got there within 24 hours, and then he came back to me. It was a little bit difficult because already having the 2 twins at home that at this point we knew had developmental delays. We didn't have our ASD, our autism diagnosis yet, but they had enough significant developmental delays that they really needed like either mom or dad, like a solid parent around pretty much 24/7. So I was in the hospital by myself with the babies for 4 days recovering from the C-section. So I would be upstairs breastfeeding Emma, trying to get naps, trying to pump, and then shoot down to be with Sam as much as possible to also breastfeed him and provide milk for him and snuggle him and sing to him and all of the things that you do with newborn babies. But he was back upstairs with us within 24 hours. And then I was in the hospital. They would have released me on day 3, but I wanted kind of one more day with the luxury of having the nurses. They'll take, this is at most hospitals. My boys were actually born in New York, and the babies, the 16-month-olds, were born here in Alaska. And at both hospitals, they would allow you, they would take your babies to it's like the maternity ward. And there's a handful of nurses, and they'll let them sleep and comfort them and feed them for you for anywhere between 1 to 3 hours, depending on how much milk you can provide them, while you take a nap. And I knew I wasn't going to get that at home. So they were willing to let me stay for 4 days. So I took advantage of that so I could go home as fresh as possible. Yeah, that's I think that's the rundown. Is there?
Well, I think about that. Once you get home, you have a set of twins, and then you have 2. The twins were still in diapers, I'm assuming. And
Yep.
so now 4 kids in diapers. What was your day like? If you can even remember back there.
Back then, I was lucky enough that my poor parents, who were terrified of flying and claustrophobic, got on a plane to come help me out with the babies for like a week. So my mom would help me during the night, but there's a couple of different theories on newborn babies and feeding. Some people adhere to a very strict every 3 hours, they need to be fed. If that means you're waking them up, then that's what they do. I tend to, especially since I was able to carry both of my babies to term, even though technically the twins were slightly under term, they developed enough in the womb that I felt like I gave them the opportunity to kind of understand hunger themselves instead of being like, okay, it's 3 hours, you're going to eat. So I didn't let them go for too long of stretches without eating, but they're also very, very good at letting you know when they're hungry. So it was a lot of craziness. And the boys actually had a bigger issue while I was pregnant than after the babies were born. After the babies were born, they did this adorable, well, it's adorable to me. They just kind of pretended they weren't there. They just kind of like went about their lives. And like, if they wanted hugs, they just got hugs. I just might have to like put somebody down on a boppy for a second because part of the boys' needs with autism is they also have what's called SPD, sensory processing disorder. And they need really strong my boys, there's different types of input that different children like. My boys like a lot of proprioceptive input, which means a lot of pressure on the joints. So they're constantly jumping. They want smushes. Like sometimes things that I'm doing look a little rough, but it helps regulate them. I heard an adult with autism that also required a lot of that deep sensory input once describe it as when they emotionally or biologically kind of got unlevel or a little off kilter, that they couldn't feel their bodies. And that's why the really strong input was able to help them kind of center. That's not a medical, synopsis of it. That's just what I heard another person with the actual experience describe their experience as being. So they still got a ton of smushes, and the babies, thank God, the babies were so chill. We were the most low maintenance babies. They were just really happy. They loved watching their big brothers. I got so lucky. If they had been colicky, which is like a gastrointestinal issue where babies are really upset and distraught and they can't relax and they can't sleep and they're in a lot of pain and discomfort a lot, I don't know what I would have done. I was just really lucky that wasn't the case. So another kind of complicated thing was my husband and I at the time decided to separate. So he moved back in temporarily when the babies were born. So he was here also too, kind of loving on the boys and helping with the babies a bit. And we just really tried to make it work as a family unit for the benefit of the kids. So I don't remember any details about that time, but I know that we really hustled to try and make everybody happy and safe. That was the priority for sure.
Does anybody have any?
Oh, this is an excellent question. Water birth has its benefits, and I also think, and obviously I'm not a medical professional in any sense, but I think it has its benefits, and then I think we kind of oversell it a little bit too. I'm a huge advocate for an at-home birth if you are showing really healthy across the board with, midwives or doulas who have medical privileges at nearby hospitals. I think that can be a really great calming birth experience. But it's also kind of interesting, like with Sam, how I was describing, he was struggling to breathe at first. Bringing him into the world in water, I'm not sure if that would have complicated the situation or if I'm overthinking it, but that's just a thought that I've had on water birth. Skin to skin, we have so much research on how important that is and how beautiful and fantastic that is for counteracting the possibility of failure to thrive, for helping with everything from their microbiomes developing on their bodies to the way that they digest food to their willingness to breastfeed. I can't oversell the benefit of skin to skin. I also think that delayed cord clamping, while the research on it is kind of new, I don't see it hurting anything. You know what I mean? I don't see it being negative. I think if it's something that you're interested in as a informed parent, that it's definitely something to talk to your doctor about and see what their take is. I also have to say, I've seen it a lot in my girlfriends where they'll go to an OB that just happens to be in their insurance network instead of really advocating and taking the time to find somebody who holds the same pregnancy and birthing beliefs that they do. And I cannot tell you how fundamentally important that is. One of my girlfriends just had a baby last month, and she's overweight. And all the doctors wanted to talk to her about was her BMI and how dangerous it was that she was even pregnant. Mind you, this poor girl had 2 miscarriages before she got pregnant with this beautiful baby boy. And how her wanting a VBAC was completely unreasonable and dangerous and selfish. And she's a very intelligent woman. She had done the research, and there are benefits and risks with everything. I explained when I talked about my C-sections from my situation with 2 babies, trying to come out like, like hockey players. I don't know. The C-section was the best idea at the time. Would I have loved a vaginal birth for the benefits that happen with that, with gut bacteria, with just the way that they're shaped coming out of the actual womb? Yeah. But again, being an intelligent, being in charge of my own medical care, being an advocate for what is best for my kids is far more important. So if you do nothing else, and I think that applies to many medical conditions and many doctors and many things that we go through with our health. I think sometimes we just think an expert is an expert or a doctor is a doctor, but we're seeing there's so many ideologies, there's so much new information that some doctors are willing to listen to and some aren't, that if you can find someone that doesn't shame you for being in a bigger body, in my friend's example, that's everything. I wish she had kind of sought out a different doctor in a lot of ways, but that's a whole other thing. But I mean, she would send me text messages about how nervous she was, how much shame she felt that she didn't get herself together before this pregnancy, blah, 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 blah. You can't control everything in life, So finding doctors that are willing to listen to the same research that you have done and understand where you're coming from, and they work for you, you know what I mean? I think is pivotal to any kind of medical ailment that you're going through. I had to have an epidural because of my C-section, so I didn't really have a choice. With epidural, it depends on how you feel as the parent of the child. With an epidural, it can be harder to push because you can't feel it. Like by default, you can't feel it. So sometimes pushing can be more difficult. It can make labor take longer. And there's a certain point in dilation, when your cervix is dilated, where it's just kind of the point of no return and you can't actually do one. So it's definitely worth researching and kind of knowing who you are and what your most important things are as the parent, right? So if you know that you have a very low pain threshold, you understand the benefits of vaginal delivery if possible, and you think an epidural is worth it to get you to the vaginal delivery, then I think that's something, there's nothing wrong with it. We really like shaming people for their choices, but if you and your partner have discussed it or you have thought it over and researched it yourself, it's not a bad thing. If you can do it without it, that's cool. And it's definitely more natural. But at the end of the day, like I said, your birth plan has to be whatever gets you a happy, healthy baby at the end of the experience. Let me see. Oh, I can only see part of this. There's a bunch of different positions that are helpful during labor, and that depends on the position of the baby and also parts of your anatomy. I have very wide hips, so there are a lot of positions that would have been beneficial for me during labor. It's kind of this interesting kind of Western thing that we all like you see in the movies and TV shows where we lay on our back and we get our knees in the stirrups and stuff like that. But with a really educated doctor or doula or midwife, there's a bunch of different positions that can be really helpful for birth. And I do think I think women way back when probably had to get very creative. And I'm sure that squatting in a sitting position was a very frequently visited position because it feels the most natural. But there's a bunch of different ways. I've seen hands and feet. I've seen squatting. I've seen help with medicine ball. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it that actually help move your baby into the right position as well. These are great questions, guys. Thank you. I'm an open book, so whatever you want to ask is completely fine.
What's like? Go ahead. Let me my echo. What's life like now that you have, they're a little bit older, they're still little, but they're a little bit older. The two little ones are, I'm sure, running around, not crawling anymore. So what is like a day? And also, are the two that have autism, are they going in for any kind of therapy or physical therapy, or how do you work with them?
Let's talk about the big boys first, because it's definitely more involved. So the big boys got their official diagnosis earlier this year. Their main symptoms are that they are nonverbal. So they have 0 words, both of them, at 4 years old. And what month are we in? 2 months. It started out with just like because when they're babies, it's just, are they growing? You know what I mean? Are they getting bigger? You're winning. You did it. You know what I mean? And then as they get older, it gets a little bit more complex, and it can sometimes take time to realize this isn't just something that they're taking their time doing. There's something else there. So with the boys, we do occupational therapy every Thursday morning, bright and early, it can be different things depending on what's going on with your child. But for us, it's really functional things. Like one of the very first goals we had with occupational therapy was doing stairs. And they were 2 at the time. Trusting their body and their spatial relationships enough to be able to do things like stairs and jumping. And now that they're a little bit older, we're working on things like coloring without still seeking out the oral. They're still quite orally fixated. Everything still wants to go in the mouth. But trying really hard to switch the primary sense of discovery from oral to tactile is a goal that we have right now in occupational therapy. But it all happens through play, which is such a big part of the benefit of occupational therapy at this age and younger, and even significantly older. I mean, how much easier do you learn something when it's being packaged to you in a fun delivery, right? So that's what occupational therapy looks like for them. It looks like trying to correctly hold a writing utensil. It looks like also what's called a sensory diet. So there's a lot of research about how with kids that have a lot of sensory needs, if you do a sensory diet, meaning you continually either help them do it themselves or provide options for them to get that significant input. Like there's a trampoline in my living room right now. I'd show you, but my living room's a mess. So there's a trampoline in here. I allow them to climb on the furniture because we're not trying to tame their wild right now. Because they physically need it. Like I said, I truly believe to feel their bodies, to help them regulate emotionally, and to help them be able to focus when you do need them to pay attention or you do need them to do things, even if you're just thinking safety. There are certain times when no truly has to mean no. And when a child's receptive and expressive communication is significantly delayed, you've got to get just a little bit creative, and any more additional focus that you can get out of them it's a game changer. So that's what OT looks like. They also it's worth noting that they go to what's called an Aspire preschool, which is sort of a ABA style preschool for kids with developmental delays. Most of the children in their class also have autism. ABA can be a really dirty word in the autism culture. A lot of older kids have really horrible influences with it, or horrible stories about it, because they weren't allowed to do their stims. Stims are things that help bring an individual back to regulation, emotional and biological. So stims sometimes can be things like if you just have to pull your ear when you're nervous. Like we all have sensory needs, in all honesty. It's just varying degrees. Like if you've ever touched anything that you're like, that's disgusting, I'm going to vomit if you make me touch that again, or smelled something that just like sent you into the next room. Those are sensory sensitivities that we all as individuals have. But for people with sensory processing disorder, your body takes the input and doesn't know what to do with it or misunderstands the communication. So it doesn't translate to the brain in the way that it needs to for you to process it, quote unquote, like a neurotypical person would. I totally lost my point there. So the Aspire Preschool is an ABA style, but it's all play-based. If my kids don't want to wear their shoes one day, they don't have to wear their shoes. If my kids have decided they're incredibly tired and they want to nap for 3 out of the 5 hours they're supposed to be doing school, they just let that happen. So it's those little things that make a huge difference between traditional ABA and kind of more new age play-based ABA that still allows them to be children and allows them to have their tics and allows them to be themselves with the structure and routine of helping them build additional skills. So they get OT. The point I was trying to make, we got a roundabout here. They have OT and a speech language pathologist within their 5-hour daily Monday through Friday program. They still get a lot of gym. They're working with this thing called the PEC system, which is a picture exchange communication system. So they will have, this may be much farther down the autism rabbit hole than you wanted to go, Miss Denise. Let me know if it's a problem. Okay. So they'll have a little picture that has Velcro on the back. And at snack time, they will all sit down and one of the teachers will have snacks. There's a couple different snack stations. So it's not like 6 kids and one poor snack person. And at this point, they've been in school since August. And because we're up here in Lake East Bejesus, Alaska, we actually have not had a single shutdown for COVID. So my kids have been able to go to school in person since August. So at this point in working with the PECS system, they're able to take their little snack card off of what is called their PECS book. It is their book. It is only theirs. It has their picture on it. It's like it's their main communication device, if you will. As they get older, if they still need something like that, they'll have an electronic device. But cognitively at this age, it's the book. So they'll hand their teacher the card that has a little snack puffy on it, and their teacher will pick up the puff and say, "You want puff?" And she shows them the picture they used and the snack, gives both back. And so the boys have learned to use the picture exchange system for everything from stop and go to snack to toys that they want within the classroom to at gym time. They'll hand their teacher the spin card and they'll get to spin around, and or the swing, they want to do the swing. And it's shown such a huge difference in them behaviorally as well, because a lot of meltdowns are actually communication frustration issues. And now they're at an age where they're 4, where they're like, "What do you mean I can't crawl in the oven? This is ridiculous," you know? So there are certain things that they just simply can't have because it's just not a thing. But they still translate that as a communication frustration. So we'll still have the meltdown. But being able to communicate even 50 to 60% of the time. And I think we're at a place where they're accurately communicating their needs, probably 70 to 80% of the time, if not 90. Has changed the number of meltdowns, the severity of meltdowns. My Oliver will self-harm when he's having a meltdown. I'm going to try not to get emotional. It's really hard to watch your 2-year-old like punch himself in the head because his feelings are so big, he doesn't know what to do. But any communication outlet, which this PEC system has given, he's just started doing, I call it sign. This means more in sign language. He'll clap, but that means he wants more food. And he does that now. And I immediately give him the food. Doesn't really matter what it is. And you can see it on his face, the pride and the happiness that he has, that he's successfully communicated a need. We have not even a tenth of the meltdowns that we had before we started any kind of intervention with them. It was a nightmare while I was pregnant because they like felt the energy that I was pregnant and they weren't able to communicate their needs. We were having multiple meltdowns a day with both boys, but Oliver's, the way that he expresses himself was so self-violent that it just tore us apart. But he's come so far. And now when he has a meltdown, it's more like your typical 4-year-old where we just cry and stomp our feet a bit and we might flail about on the ground, but that's not anything you're not going to see at a Tuesday in Target. So I can live with it, you know? So the boys also do speech language therapy on Fridays, but I'm trying not to add too many extracurriculars to their already pretty intense schedule at school. At this age, they're 4. the neuroplasticity, their ability to learn is so huge at this age. Their research has shown that kids who get intervention, really young, as opposed to kids that get intervention like 7 to 12 or even older, their ability to build those skills of independence is a lot harder hill to climb for them. So I'm grateful for what we have available to us now. And I'm really, really hopeful for the boys' future. Frankly, like as a parent, I've had to shatter my every expectation for my children. And honestly, it's only made us and them a lot happier. But if we can just get through this self-harm thing entirely, I'm a happy camper. We'll be able to figure everything else out from there. So that's what the boys are going through. The babies love their big brothers. They think they're the coolest thing since sliced bread. My Emma Jean, she's such a bully, and she's the smallest one out of all of them. She's this tiny little thing. And the boys will be playing with something and she'll march right over to them and try and take it from them. Absolutely. Thank you, Monica. She'll try and take something from them, and they're so patient with her. They'll just let her have it. They might come over to me and complain, but one of my biggest fears was that there would be a transference of that violence and that big emotional eruption to the babies. Never, not once. So I'm really grateful for that as well. And also our evaluation was done by a psychiatric it was a psychiatric neurological evaluation. I'm messing up those terms. I apologize, but it was done like at the largest hospital here in Anchorage. And he expressed to us that having the siblings, even though they're younger developmentally, they're just about on par at this point. So the babies are helping to push the boys, and the babies are also learning from the boys, because there's still elements where the boys are still very four. So it's just kind of cool to see them kind of symbiotically really help each other out. And they're doing fantastic together. They really are.
Well, as I've said before, you have your hands full. Can't even imagine also, but it sounds like the boys are they're like right where they need to be. That there's an amazing program that they can be a part of. And I'm sure that makes a huge difference, because as a parent of multiples for one, and then autistic kids, there's a lot that you have to do in order to, engage them in life and help them to be successful. So you're doing everything right.
Thank you. That's my only thing that I think about now. Like I try and parent from 30,000 feet and look at the big picture. And the only goal that I have is, how can I make sure that all of these kids are happy when I'm not here to protect them anymore? That's all that I care about. And if they don't have the skills to communicate, if they don't have the ability to self-regulate, it's going to be incredibly hard for them to advocate for themselves. And I just don't want to have to rely on a different adult to be able to advocate for them the way that I do. So whatever I have to do to help them get the skills that they need in their own time and in their own way, we're going to go for it.
Do you guys have any further questions? I know we're a little bit long, but.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's fine. We don't have, I don't think anybody has a class. Monica may have because she left, but
Jasmine, this is an excellent question. I had postpartum depression both times after my babies. I didn't experience any that's not true. My C-section incision got infected both times. That was due to me not prioritizing putting back together my poor body after having all those babies. So I had postpartum depression both times. Actually, when I was pregnant with the last set of babies, I proactively enrolled in counseling while I was pregnant so that I could work through some things and prepare myself for after the babies. And I will say I had significantly less issues after the second set of babies, even though it was one of the most difficult times in my life, because I was no longer with my husband. I had all of these babies. I was very, very lost. But with excellent counseling, excellent friends, even all over the US, I was able to to keep it together and able to work through and process a lot of what was going on for me. I think postpartum depression is a lot more common than we think that it is. And I recall also feeling like I couldn't tell anybody about it, that they were going to take my kids away if I was vocal about how I was feeling. That was the first time with the boys. And I was so wrong. And for anybody that's going through anything like that you have in your lives, there's nothing wrong with getting help. No one's they can't even get people to take babies away from people who don't deserve their babies. You know what I mean? They're not going to come take them from beautiful, good-hearted people that are just trying to be better moms. It's just not going to happen. And then the other thing I wanted to say is I had very significant diastasis recti after both sets of twins, and I'm still recovering from it with the babies. So diastasis recti is when the walls of your abdomen separate to accommodate your pregnancy and don't come back together the way that they're supposed to. For many, many women, even after one pregnancy, there's still a little bit of a separation. But for me, I started out after the second pregnancy with, it was called 4 finger gap between each wall of my abdomen when I laid down. And then when you go to sit up, it buckles. So it looks like you have this like plateau when you go to sit up, on top of excess skin and stretch marks and all that other fun stuff. So what I've been in physical therapy to help fix that, and it's helped a lot. And it really starts with strengthening your pelvic floor and then working your way up with the muscle groups. And I'm very hopeful that I'll be able to, they won't come all the way back together. That's just not going to happen after 4 babies and 2 shots of pregnancy. And that's completely fine. I just want to look normal with clothes on. That would be fantastic. But through the exercises and everything, I've gone from a 4-finger gap to a 3-finger gap, and I've only been in therapy a couple of months. I also had to give my body like a year to be ready to even do this. I tried it right after the babies were born, and it was too much. It was too hard. It didn't take. I wasn't building the strength that I'm able to build now a year and some change later. So those were the 2 biggest postpartum issues that I personally had after both sets of babies. That's an excellent question. Everybody is all up in your business until the babies come, and then we forget that mom is still recovering from major life events. So,
anybody else? I know it took you guys really long, so hopefully you guys are you're here, so you're good.
Sorry, guys, I came prepared for an hour. Sorry.
I want to say thank you so much. I've learned so much just listening to you and your experience.
Awesome.
And you have a lot of knowledge. Amazing amount of knowledge for all that you've been through.
Thank you so much, Miss Denise. I really appreciate being allowed to do this. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you guys. Can you guys unmute your mics and say thank you?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Jacqueline, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You guys are more than welcome. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you all. I hope you understand even autism a little bit better now, because it's wildly misunderstood.
Definitely. Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bye, Jacqueline.